Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Chris Mason and Rachel Bird.
Our headlines today. Boris Johnson attempts to see off a Conservative rebellion on his new coronavirus restrictions by telling backbenchers the tiers could end in February.
Family and friends of Jack Merritt and Saskia Jones commemorate their lives 1 year on from the London Bridge terror attack.
Dave Prowse, the man behind the mask of Darth Vader, has died at the age of 85.
Kavan, the world's loneliest elephant, prepares for a new life of freedom, thanks in part to a campaign by the singer Cher.
Good morning. There was a del of a shock in the FA Cup. Yeah, nothing but the best for Chorley of the 6th tier, who reached the 3rd round.
Morning all, it's quite a quiet Sunday, a lot of cloud around but largely dry with light winds, and temperatures should peak into double figures. All the details coming up shortly.
Good morning. Just after 6 o'clock, it is Sunday the 29th of November. Our top story, Boris Johnson is attempting to head off a rebellion by his own MPs over his new tougher tiers of coronavirus restrictions by promising there'll be another vote at the end of January.
The England-wide lockdown comes to an end on Wednesday. In his letter to party MPs, the Prime Minister said measures could be eased for some areas during December and promised a second vote in the new year. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
It's a testing time for the Prime Minister. He's facing a rebellion from some of his own MPs when the Commons votes on his new 3-tier restrictions in England on Tuesday. So last night he wrote to his Conservative colleagues with a new formula to try to shrink the size of the revolt. In his letter he promises that if MPs back him this week, he'll give them a new vote on the restrictions on January the 27th. If he loses that vote, then the restrictions will end on February the 3rd. And he says a review of restrictions next month means some areas could come out of Tier 3 on December the 19th, though that will still depend on the evidence. And the newly appointed Minister for Vaccines had this message for any Conservative MP thinking of rebelling.
If we work together, we can very quickly move from the tier system to coming down those tiers to Tier 2 and Tier 1 with the mass testing.
The Prime Minister is also offering a fortnightly review of the tiers. But has he done enough to win over the rebels? Well, one of them told the BBC he wasn't impressed.
We asked for a lot of information, and that letter doesn't contain that information. So unless we get it between now and Tuesday, then it doesn't change anything, I'm afraid.
Boris Johnson wants to avoid relying on Labour votes to get his restrictions through the Commons. They are asking for more help for the worst affected areas. The Prime Minister says he wants to squeeze the disease, but first he'll have to squeeze the rebellion in his own ranks. Ian Watson, BBC News.
The government has secured another 2 million doses of the coronavirus vaccine from the US, which proved 95% effective after trials. The UK now has 7 million jabs on order from the American company Moderna. If the vaccine is approved, doses could be delivered by next spring.
The UK has called on the European Union to bring fresh thinking to post-Brexit trade talks, which Downing Street says could end this week. The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been in London this weekend for talks with his UK counterpart. But big differences remain over fair competition and fishing. The transition period ends in 5 weeks.
Police patrols will be stepped up and there will be greater surveillance using drones and radar on French beaches to stop migrants crossing the Channel to England. It comes after the UK and France reached a new agreement to double the number of officers. The Home Office didn't say how many more officers would be deployed.
Primary school pupils across Scotland will get free meals all year round if the SNP wins next May's election.
The promise was made by Deputy First Minister John Swinney at the party's annual conference. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley has more.
The pandemic and Marcus Rashford's campaign to end child poverty have seen the free school meals debate rise up the political agenda. In England, after pressure, the government has promised £400 million to help disadvantaged children and their families. But Scotland is now set to make big changes, with the SNP saying if it wins power again, all primary school pupils will be entitled to free breakfast and lunch all year round, including in the school holidays.
We want every child to have every chance to learn every minute of every school day, starting from the moment they arrive in class. A child arriving at school hungry cannot learn as well as they should.
The new scheme is due to come in from 2022. It'll cost about £250 million a year. The SNP's conference comes at a time when support for independence is, according to polls, on the rise. Policies like this one help the party draw a distinction with Westminster. But with independence on the agenda, political opponents have accused the SNP of being distracted when everyone should be focused on the pandemic. Nick Eardley, BBC News, Glasgow.
Family and colleagues have paid tribute to the two people killed in the London Bridge terror attack, which happened a year ago today. Jack Merritt, who was 25, and 23-year-old Saskia Jones were stabbed by a convicted terrorist at a prisoner rehabilitation event. In a statement, Saskia's mother, Michelle, thanked those who have supported the family through a difficult 12 months.
Labour says peak rail fares should be suspended over Christmas to reduce the risk of overcrowding during off-peak periods. A surge in journeys is expected when restrictions on family visits are temporarily eased between the 23rd and 27th of December. The party is calling on the Transport Secretary to present a travel plan to Parliament tomorrow.
The actor who played Darth Vader in the Star Wars trilogy has died at the age of 85. Dave Prowse passed away after a short illness.
He'll be remembered for being the man behind the mask of one of film history's most iconic characters in a career spanning over 50 years, as Lizo Mzimba reports.
At 6'6" with a towering figure, Dave Prowse was physically perfect for the part of Darth Vader in the original Star Wars trilogy in the 1970s and 1980s.
Looks like you two need a lesson in crossing the road.
At the same time, he was also the face of road safety, presenting videos and visiting thousands of schools as the Green Cross Code Man.
We won't be there when you cross the road, so always use the Green Cross Code.
It's very interesting because when I became Darth Vader, or at least when the Star Wars film came out, I almost got the sack from the government because they thought that my image as Darth Vader would have a detrimental effect on my image as the Green Cross Code Man.
A champion weightlifter, he eventually tried acting, playing a succession of small roles, including one in Stanley Kubrick's classic A Clockwork Orange, sharing scenes with Malcolm McDowell.
Cheers.
And then came the role of the physically imposing Darth Vader. He had the bulk, he had the build, but he also had a Bristol accent.
Start tearing this ship apart piece by piece until you found those tapes. Find the passengers of this vessel. I want them alive. You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take her away.
When the first Star Wars film came out, he found that his dialogue had been replaced with the booming tones of James Earl Jones.
I have traced the rebel spies to her. Now she is my only link to finding their secret base.
He may never have been the voice behind the villain, but the man behind the mask of Darth Vader is how he'll always be remembered. And for so many, he played the most iconic cinema villain ever seen.
Dave Prowse, who's died at the age of 85.
It is 8 minutes past 6. Now, he is often called the world's loneliest elephant after living in miserable conditions in a Pakistani zoo for the past 3 decades.
But now Kavan will live out the rest of his life at a wildlife sanctuary in Cambodia. It follows a 5-year campaign supported by the singer Cher. Secunda Kamani reports.
Why is this house so small?
This is the story of one of the world's most famous pop stars and the world's loneliest elephant. After 35 years in captivity, at times left chained up, Kavan is being set free. Tens of thousands of people signed a petition on his behalf. His most vocal supporter, superstar Cher. Earlier this year, she described news of his upcoming release as one of the greatest moments of her life. Kavan was given to Pakistan as a gift by the Sri Lankan government back in 1985. But he's been badly treated at this zoo, enduring poor conditions. Life got even worse after his only companion died 8 years ago.
The way Kavan is swaying his head from side to side is a common sign of distress, and it's something that he spends a lot of time doing. It's why campaigners have been so keen to move him.
Come here, Kevin. Very good.
Now Kovan will be taken to a wildlife sanctuary in
Good
Cambodia
boy. Come here.
after a court shut the zoo
Come
down
here.
until its facilities are improved.
boy.
A specialist
Come here.
international charity has
Come
been
here.
preparing him for the journey,
Good.
trying to get him used to the crate he will fly in, using food to encourage him to obey their commands.
It's like any other dog training or training your cat or whatever. Or
A bit bigger than a cat.
it's a little big, just it depends on the cat. I think the main deal is that he feels comfortable with whatever you do, or at least excited enough to follow and maybe to follow you somehow. Yeah, because as soon as he is kind of afraid, as soon as he shows like how do you say mistrust, yeah, then you can go back home.
And now the end is near.
Kovan weighs around 5 tons. Moving him will be a huge logistical challenge. But the charity's leading vet has discovered how to help keep him calm, singing to him. His favourite song, Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way. Sikandar Kamani, BBC News, Islamabad.
Much more than this, I did it my way.
Now, that really is a gorgeous story because these elephants were treated terribly at this particular enclosure. So we'll talk to Sikandar, I think, live from the scene a little bit later on.
Good news for the big beast on the move. Now, if you were watching yesterday, you'll remember we showed you a valuable lesson in the importance of timing when it comes to the big moment of turning on the Christmas lights.
4, 3, 2, 1.
It still makes me laugh every time I see it. Do you remember, that was the officials in Bridgewater in Somerset being a bit slow with their ceremonial plunger. Well, it turns out that this kind of blunder happens more often than you think. Have a look at this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy Christmas!
That is the Mayor of Hertford, also caught out by a timings crisis. Good luck to all mayors switching on their Christmas lights this week. I'm sure there won't be a single camera phone pointed in your direction.
It's that thing, do we go on 1 or do we go on 0? Or do we just make sure we look at the guy with the plunger?
The added quirk is, of course, that the people who end up being the butt of the joke don't know it's happened, do they? Because it's behind them. And then you throw in the face coverings they're having to wear, and it's just gloriously
Kudos,
absurd.
by the way, to all fake plunger makers out there.
Indeed.
Who clearly have their work cut out this time of year.
But also the true pressure for the people off camera who have got the light switch in their hands. That's where the real pressure
I think they
lies,
might be
isn't it?
looking at the guy with the plunger, but anyway.
Well, yeah. If in doubt, just leave it.
Let's take a look at today's front pages, shall we? Here's the Telegraph leading on the letter. We're talking about this morning that Boris Johnson has written to MPs, saying the new tier system could end in just 9 weeks. Now, does anyone think that's actually going to happen? But anyway, in theory, it's possible, with the Commons able to vote again on the restrictions in late January.
Let's take a look at the Sunday Times next. Boris Johnson's letter is described by this newspaper as a sign of disarray in Downing Street. It comes after a growing number of backbench MPs said that they would vote against restrictions being in place until Easter.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has used the Mail on Sunday to urge people not to flout restrictions in a bid to what he calls the sunlit upland pastures ahead. I'm sure we've heard those comments from him before.
Indeed. And it was a big night in the Strictly ballroom last night.
Have a look at this. Singer and TV presenter Hervey proved the highlight of the show with this routine. It was absolutely brilliant. It earned the praise. It was a, what do they call it? Couple's choice.
Yeah.
But it earned the praise of the famously hard to please Craig Revel-Horwood.
G-O-A-T. Goat. Yes. Come on, darling.
Yeah, I'm slow.
Obviously, no one's down with the teens as much as me.
Can you translate
Well, it normally
the rest of
stands for greatest of all time.
Yeah, it took them a while to kind of hook onto that, didn't it?
Yes.
But it did mean that they went on to get a perfect score, the first 30 of the series, because, of course, there are 3 judges at the moment.
Shirley, you have said that Harvey delivered...
Craig Revel-Horwood. 10.
So there we go. First ever perfect score in week 6 of the show. Jeanette's first perfect score since she began on Strictly.
I'm still rooting for Ranveer. works on a TV show that none of us here have ever heard of, but I do occasionally bump into her in Downing Street.
What is that show? She did well last night.
Yeah, she did.
She did well, but it's tough, and the standard, I mean,
And
we probably say this every year, but
poor
very
Clara,
high.
first out, wasn't she, last night, Clara Amfo? And what was I think you could sort of summarise the judge's verdict, which was that it was better than last week, but it still wasn't very good.
Yeah, she is. The thing about her is I think she's got phenomenal talent. I wonder if nerves slightly got the better of her last night, but keep my fingers crossed for her.
And little wonder, because the nerve thing.
Oh.
I mean, I just cannot imagine that whole thing of trying to work out what you're doing and there's cameras.
No, but we'd all like to see it, wouldn't we?
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.